Okay, good morning. Now, I'm going to try to get through this day. I've had 4 wisdom teeth pulled on Friday at once. So ibuprofen is really a powerful drug that is going to help me get through this. But I want to welcome everyone, first off, to the 19th Annual Statewide Supportive Housing Conference. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I am New York City Councilmember Donovan Richards. For those of you who do not know me, I have the distinct honor of chairing the Public Safety Committee in the City Council, which gives me jurisdiction and oversight over the New York City Police Department. Today we are joined by some esteemed panelists, and I'm going to run down the line, say their names, and then give them an opportunity to certainly introduce themselves to you. Most of you know why we're here today. We're here to speak on the relationship between the NYPD along with our supportive housing partners who do great work in this city. For those of you who are unaware of what the NCO program is, the Neighborhood Coordinating Officers Program, it's a program that the NYPD has enacted to really try to build true trust between communities and the police department. I don't really have to go into what the relationships, especially for low-income Black and brown communities, has looked like with the NYPD going back for decades. We know that there have been challenges there, but one thing I do, as I criticize and critique the department on often, one thing that I do give them major kudos on doing is looking at charting a course forward to really truly bring together police and community. Just some quick examples of that. I represent the 31st District in Queens. I was actually the first, both of my precincts were the first precincts in New York City to roll out the NCO program, partly because in Queens, we led the city, especially in the Rockaways, in stop and frisk, a lot of those encounters with the police department. So we were both the 100th and 101 precinct in the Rockaways were the first precincts to see this program. And I want to say we have seen stark differences in the relationship between the police and community. And one of the things that I love about the program is that normally you get the same actors. So they do these community meetings in the community, and normally you would see the same civic association people, the same tenant association people. But when you go to the meetings that they're holding in our communities, you see the community actually come out. People who normally would not attend community meetings are really showing up to these meetings, which is really giving the community more of even a stake and a voice in the way their communities are policed. With that being said, we know that there still are a lot of challenges to build that trust with the community in the department. And in terms of supportive housing, you know, we've seen some examples. Just a few weeks ago, I was in at police headquarters where I unfortunately had to view a video of a young man who met his demise in the Bronx through an encounter that obviously we think training and other things could have made things better. But at the same time, these NCO officers are putting in the work to try to build that relationship out. So that's largely what we will go into today, is how can we do better as a city? What are some recommendations that could come out of this? What are we seeing on the ground level when it comes to interactions with the police department in our communities? And just lastly, before I turn over to hear some remarks from the panelists, one of the things we focused on in the city council, and for those of you who know the name of Saeed Vasu, who unfortunately was a gentleman out in Brooklyn who met his demise, unfortunately, because the services weren't being rendered to him to a great degree. But one of the things we called for was the NYPD and the mayor to actually come up with a real crisis prevention plan. And there is a task force that was enacted after his death, and we look forward to those recommendations coming out, because one of the things we want to do is decrease the interactions between the police department and our supportive housing partners and communities. We really want to see more social workers at the forefront of the conversation and not such a heavy police emphasis when we're responding to people in crisis. So with that being said, I am now going to introduce our panelists. And I'll start with Eshawn Hall, who's the program director of McLaughlin East Harlem Residence and Good Shepherd Services. Good
morning.
Clap. Officer Kerri-Ann and Officer Nibal Pena. Pena, did I say that right? Okay, neighborhood coordinating officers in the 23rd Precinct out in Harlem. Madeline, Vidal, building director of Breaking Ground, the Brook.
Good morning.
And Officer Adrian Zambrano and Officer Jordan Abidin, neighborhood coordination officers for the 40th Precinct. And I'll briefly just have you introduce what your programs do, and if the NTOs want to chime in on what are some things that they're focused on, and we'll start from there. So we'll work our way down, starting with you, Mr. Smalls.
Good morning. Again, my name is Eshawn Hall. I work at the McLaughlin East Harlem residence, which is on 110th Street between Park and Madison. It's a 51-bed residence. We have 15 units for single mothers, and then we have 36 single units. So with that combination, on any given day, there could be issues or concerns around physical violence, intimate partner violence, substance abuse, or mental health challenges, along with anything else you could think of or you've seen in your respective locations. I've been working in the field for about 20 years in various settings, all housing, post-incarceration, domestic violence shelters, DHS contracted shelters. I've probably worked with some people in this room at different spaces or different times. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Officer Smith, 203 Precinct, NCO Charlie. We work closely with Eshawn Hall here, my partner. I've been in the precinct since 2013, and the NCO program started in 2016. And at the start of the NCO program, that's when I also started. And it's been a good program. It's still a work in progress. It's getting much better. We're getting a closer relationship with the community. And one of our great partners, of course, is Good Shepherd McLaughlin in East Harlem. And we always have a good relationship. He can call us or text us whenever he wants. We have an open relationship. Whatever he needs, we're there, and he's also there to support us. We have a great relationship.
Good morning. My name is Nibal Pena. My partner, Officer Smith, work on the 23rd Precinct East Harlem. We cover from 96th Street to 115th Street. And the majority of our locations is housing as well. We have the biggest house in PSA 5. We cover from the 25 Precinct to 8 and the 23rd Precinct. We are not housing PSA 5, but we cover the 23rd Precinct. As my partner said, NCO Charlie, from 96th Street, Park Avenue to 5th Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Madeline Vidal. I am building director for one of the breaking ground buildings in the Mott Haven section of the Bronx. It's called the Brook. We have 189 units. 120 of those units are special needs units, individuals coming directly from the shelters. We have 27 HASA units and then another 69 units of low income. I've been working in this field for over 25 years, working in programs as well as property management. We work in a really challenging neighborhood. For those of you who are very familiar with the Bronx, the South Bronx is like the hub of the opiate crisis. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate my two friends here, two officers who we work really closely with to try to provide a good quality of life for the tenants in our buildings. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Officer Jordan Abidin. I work in the 40th Precinct. I've been at the 40th Precinct for approximately 4 years now, and I've been with the Neighborhood Coordination Officers Unit for approximately 2 years. So the way I usually like to introduce myself is give them a little background. I grew up in New York City in Queens, born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens. So I was raised with a single mother. So I understand what people go through in the city. So that's why I feel the Neighborhood Coordination Officers Unit was a great opportunity for myself to build a relationship, because I understand what's going on, to work with the people, especially in the South Bronx, in a challenging area, as Madeline explained. It's very challenging in the South Bronx. So I think it's a good way to connect with them, especially knowing what they're going through as well.
Good morning. I just want to say I'm sorry for being a little late. Weather and coming from the Bronx is a little far, traffic. I just want to say my name is Officer Adrian Zambrano. I've been with the 40th Precinct for approximately 6 years. I actually started an Impact, Operation Impact, which is walking the beat. People know about that, how it went down. Then I had the, great pleasure of getting offered the NCO unit, which is the Neighborhood Coordination Officer unit, which me and my partner have been together for approximately 2 years now. It's a stepping stone in trying to build a better relationship with the officers and everybody in the community. I had a PAL, a Police Athletic League, right next to my building apartment, which showed me that police officers are regular people. And if, these kids and people in the community see us being as regular people as them, it will help and figure out these challenges that they have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. Doing important work. All righty, I want to start with Madeline. You mentioned something about the challenges in the South Bronx. And the first question I have is, how has the tenants and staff relationship with the police department actually changed? So you're dealing with an opioid crisis. Are we seeing more interactions, positive interactions with the police department? Can you just speak to a little bit of your experience now?
Sure. So, just changing the culture has been a challenge for us, and it's the first step, because a lot of folks really see the police in a negative way, for various reasons. And one of the things that we did at the Brook is try to have what's called the build-a-block meeting at our buildings. So Officer Zambrano and Abidin, they facilitate a monthly community meeting for the neighborhood. So I reached out to them and I offered them our community room so that we can start introducing the officers in a more positive light to our tenants. So we successfully had our first meeting a few months ago. And that was pretty successful. We had a few tenants come down, listen to the message, introduce themselves to the officers, and the word started spreading around that, hey, we have these officers coming to the building. Another thing that we've done is, offer the sectors, because there's different sectors, meaning, and I'll let Zambrano and Abidin explain that a little further later. But the same police officers have a regular schedule, so they come out to whatever calls that are made, and tenants can get familiar with the officers because it's the same officers answering to a call. So having the sectors use our bathrooms, they have all shifts, so we make our community room available if they want to have lunch. We make the bathrooms available if they're doing their rounds and they want to come and use the restroom. So the tenants see the regular faces of the officers coming in a more positive light, not just for emergencies. Thirdly, we've just been really working for about a year now, so we have a lot of ideas that we're trying to roll out, but we have our different events in the buildings, like 4th of July barbecues, Memorial Day barbecues, so inviting the NCO officers to come join and possibly help out on the grill, spend some time with the tenants playing games. I mean, that's really building the relationship with the officers so that, again, we can change the perception of the officers in a more positive light. So that's what we've been doing thus far.
Now, raise your hand if you've heard of a build-a-block meeting before, if you're in the audience. Have you? Okay. Can you, Officers Adrian and Officer Jordan, speak of what the build-a-block meetings are?
So the build-a-block meetings, the purpose of the build-a-block meeting is for the community to come together, and pretty much the main goal is to come together and work together to better the community. So basically how it usually goes is that the community will invite the community to come out, and as you come out to our meeting, we want you to come in and address any issues or any problems you're having in your neighborhood, in your block, or near the train station that you're going to work in, or where you work. So we invite not only residents, we invite businesses, we invite schools, so we can pretty much know what's going on and how we could come together and how we could come to solutions together. It's also a great way to bond and build relationships as well, because my sergeant used to always explain the NCOs as this. So everybody, you always have your doctor, that same doctor that you always go to, right? You always have that same mechanic that you always go to, so why don't you have that same officer that you always go to? And that's what we are, and that's what we do, and that's why we have those build-a-block meetings.
Officer Jordan, you want to?
Zambrano, I'm Officer Zambrano.
I
just want to talk about it's all right. The Build-A-Block meeting is also about precision policing. Is what the term they're using. Basically, it's about, so we get a complaint, and hopefully me and my partner could come out and fix that complaint. For an example, we have a building that was complaining about people injecting, doing heroin outside in the stoop area. So we contacted the building owner. We asked them if they could look at it. They was able to put a gate, and it stopped that issue. So basically, precision policing, whatever we could do to help, that's what we try to do with the contacts and the resources that we get, such as Madeline, helping us with, whatever community events that we need. Also with Bronx Work to try to help with the homeless. Whatever issues that anybody has is hopefully we'll have the contact and the resources to get these people some help. Everybody, I like to just change one person's mind at a time is what I say, even to the kids, and that's what that's what we try to do at these Build-A-Block meetings.
Great, and I really urge you, if you're unaware of where your meetings are, if you got Twitter, you can go on Twitter. The police department loves to tweet, and they tweet these meetings out at least every hour, it seems like, at least on my Twitter feed. So you should really attend one. It's really a good meeting to attend to build the relationship as well. I want to move to Mr. Hall now and ask him, are you noticing any trends in the number of calls to 911 from your residents since the NCOs have come into play? Are you seeing an increase in calls go to 911? Or are we seeing a decrease, or are you seeing a shift in the environment?
There's actually been a reduction in 911 calls. The calls we do see are more medical related. I stubbed my toe, they call 911 for ambulance, or, the baby's coughing for 3 days, 911. So we don't see the rise in calls that we used to due to the relationship. So as my colleague was just saying, we do host the NCO meetings. In a nutshell, hosting a meeting at your site is going to cost you nothing in terms of resources, in terms of cash. So making a call, making a contact to NCO, having them come in to utilize your space is going to tremendously help everything in the building. One, just with their presence. So if somebody was going to do something, if they're seeing officers coming in to use the bathroom regularly, or coming in to charge their phone on their lunch break, or eating a sandwich, is more police in and out of the building. So that alone is going to help to settle some things in the building. Two, the resources that they're going to be able to provide that's within the precinct. So unfortunately, we do see intimate partner violence in our setting. They have a safe horizons component in their precinct. So utilizing that contact is helpful as well. So we've actually seen a reduction, and it's very helpful. And then to just have a number that you could text a police officer to ask a question. We're having a concern about band guests coming into the building. How should we get over this hurdle? We'll have a conversation about it versus us trying to come up with something with 10 different things that don't work. We could go right to the source, find out what's worked in the past, what legally works, and, that issue's done. So it's definitely been a reduction because of the relationship.
Mr. Hall mentioned an important thing, and the interaction in and out of buildings. It's cost-free to do these meetings as well. Not to mention that depending on the NCO, and I get to visit different meetings across the city, they have free cookies. They bring refreshments. And then I've been to some where they bring a fledgling meal out.
Let me just say, they bought pizza, which was awesome. Okay, food is a motivator.
It is a motivator.
The pizza brought in the tenants, so that's great.
All righty. All right, I want some chicken. Should have said right. So he spoke of 911 and certainly a decrease in the calls he's seeing at his facility. I want to go to Officers Kerri-Ann Smith and Officer Nibal to speak about the intersection between NCOs and 911 calls, and when should providers call 911 opposed to calling you?
Excuse me. 911 calls are usually left for emergencies. It was like if there's imminent danger to someone's life. You know, like also that Eshawn said, if someone is hurt, sick, or so forth. And also if you see someone is about to damage your property or so forth. That's usually what 911 calls are for. Usually, other than that, for non-emergencies, they contact either 311 or, like Eshawn says, text us, call us, or email us. Say, hey, Officer Smith, Officer Pena, we having this issue. What do you think we should do? Can you swing by? Sure, we'll swing by. That's usually how it goes. But 911 is usually there for emergency, and we always urge them, first and foremost, call 911 right away. And then when the officers are on the way, then you can call us. And sometimes when it's over the airways, that there's a call at the location, and we're working, we can also know that it's going on, and we can also respond depending on circumstances.
As my partner said, people don't usually call the police to say, hi, how are you? Right? So usually some issues going on, and that's the reason why the department gives us an extra phone. So even when we are off duty, we have both phones. So it's just the willingness to help. So whenever someone has an issue, like my partner said, officer, this is going on, or we have a meeting at our location, can you pass by? I remember one instance, we had actually one of the business owners called us, we had an issue with some checks, but our employee is the one that was doing it, so can you give us some guidance? What can we do? So we went and fixed it. Unfortunately, someone had to get arrested at that time, but that's the reason why, that's the interception, like my partner said.
Yeah, and I want to go back to Madeline or Mr. Hall. Can you give any examples of when you've had to contact NCOs opposed to 911, or how do you differentiate whether to contact an NCO officer versus calling 911?
So 911 is like Officer Pena mentioned, and Kerri-Ann, it's immediate danger. I'll give a perfect example. We had a man come into the building who was not a tenant, who was not a guest, and was very irate. He seemed like he was definitely not well. Started yelling, became fixated with our security guards, and sort of threatening, spat on the security guard, was posturing to physically assault the security guard. At that time, we called 911. We didn't call our NCO officer because this warrants an arrest, an immediate arrest, taken to the hospital. We've had some ongoing noise complaints with similar tenants, and I know our NCO officers have been trying to intersect with that, try to resolve the issue. So that's when I called our NCO officers that we're still getting the same reports of noise complaints. Can they come out? They asked me to try to speak with the tenant because the tenant is really, really special. But we have that ongoing dialogue of, how can they assist? What can we do? And we work, we collaborate together to try to resolve the issue.
So to kind of piggyback on what Madeline was saying, of course, for immediate, imminent emergencies, you're going to call 911. But sometimes we all have these issues that are just ongoing. I call it similar to like the East Coast, West Coast feud. Like it just seems to never stop between 206 and 504. It predates me working there for 5 years. But in order to get a handle on it, we may have tried every combination or set of scenarios that we could come up with to try to, mediate the situation, and it's not working. We would reach out to our NCOs to see if they've either dealt with this at another location, maybe know of some resources in the community that we may not be familiar with, or if they may be able to come in and, assist with the mediation. So we've reached out. We were having a concern about a banned tenant policy and trying to enforce it. We had a sign up right behind the security guard that says this building is for use of the tenants and their guests. So if they let the guests in, how is the person banned? And, we went through this whole thing of, maybe the 8 to 4 police would knock on the door and ask the guests to leave. The 4 to 12, they'd knock at the door gently. Oh, they didn't answer. There's nothing we could do. It's a building issue. And then after speaking with our NCO officers, learned that, Mount Sinai Hospital has a similar ban policy. This is the document that they physically use. Maybe you can use this as a template, and if you had something like this, along with the lease up front with the security guards, then we would know the apartment is leased to Joe Smith, and you have this to state that this person's banned, the person would be removed or arrested if they refused. And it's been very helpful. I think we've definitely used it in May, not yet in June, but it's helpful and it works.
And I want to stay on this for a second because I think both Madeline and Eshawn mentioned two important things, and that's the relationship with NCOs. And I guess in those moments of crisis, we want to know, do you get that call? If there's an emergency call, are you consulted? Or can we count on you to show up at the building to address an emergency situation? So how does that play out when 911 calls come over the radio? Would you be consulted, or would we see regular patrol officers within a sector?
Usually when the 911 call goes out, we're not consulted. 911 call goes out to the operator, then the operator sends it out over the airways. If we are working, we'll hear the call over the airways also. We won't get the call from the precinct to say, Officer Smith and Pena, please respond to this location. However, again, we will hear it over the airways, so we will go there to assist the sector, but the sector is the one that gets the call. They're the main person that usually gets the call. We just go to back them up if we are available, if we're at a certain other job or a situation is going on. But it's usually the sector call that gets the call to go out to respond to the 911 calls. But we have, like the other day, I think it was yesterday, there was an issue where we came over the airways that there was aided at the location, and we just happened to be driving by because it's our area. So we drove by, and shortly before arrival, Eshawn called us and said, hey, there's something going on here. Could you swing by? And we said, sure. So we swing by, and upon further investigation, it wasn't just a regular aided. It was actually a dispute that turned a little violent. Person had some scratches, or laceration rather, on their back. So it actually turned out to be an assault. And like you said, it went well. The arrest, there was no conflict during the arrest. The perpetrator actually knew us. So when they came back, because they lived there, when they came back, we talked and said, hey, what happened? They said, oh, no. It's like, okay, well, what has to be done. I said, yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to run or what have you. I said, okay, well, what we have to do is go to the precinct. And it wasn't any conflict. They gladly went, because they know us, they've interacted with us in the past, and, stuff like that. But usually 911 calls go throughout the sector.
As my partner said, 911 calls, immediately enter, the sector goes. When I say sector, I mean 2 patrol officers of that area goes to your address. What we do after that, let's say if we are not working, when we come back on our first day of work, next week we review all the complaints. So we read the complaints from the previous days that we were not in. So if there was an assault in X location that I cover the area, I pay a visit to that location. Sometimes we get more info from either tenants or victim as of why it happened. Let's say an assault happened in this location, but then we find out sometimes people tell you more of what is written on a report. Sometimes the report is just a blank paper, but then when we go in person and we find out that the person that got assaulted traveled from the Bronx to Manhattan and get to look for a fight in that place, then we rely that information to the detectives. This person traveled all the way from X to Y, and then you're gonna make a complaint to look for a fight. Maybe that's not the correct resolution. So we get more info going in person and trying to find out what happened.
And I'm assuming you deal with a lot of challenges as NCOs. You're dealing with populations that have a lot of challenges. I'm assuming it takes a certain expertise. You sound very calm sitting here and talking about these instances, right? And these examples of calls you have to respond to. Can you go into, and this is for Officers Zambrano and Abidin, can you go into what training or expertise you have to become an NCO officer? What are some of the characteristics that NCOs should have, especially when dealing with some of our most vulnerable populations?
So when we became NCOs, our captain explained it as this: our NCO should be the best cops that are in the precinct. So you pretty much got to know what's going on. You got to know everything, how to deal with people, how to deal with certain situations. So already coming into the NCO unit, you should already be at that high level of being an officer. So then once you become once you become an NCO, now they give you additional training. Some of the trainings include mediation training. Mediation was a great training for myself because it taught me not only how to talk and deal with people, but it taught me a really important lesson on how to listen, about active listening. Because that's the number one thing you have to do is listen. And learning how to listen and learning how to mediate situations and disputes, it was a great help, especially with the community, because that's one of the major things that we deal with when it's in regards to gang disputes between youths, or whether it's between neighbors who have ongoing violence with each other, or even domestic violence. Another one is crisis intervention, which my partner could tell you about.
So basically, crisis intervention is dealing with people with special needs and how to deal with them and how to be able to communicate and to understand them in a different light. Normally, what happens is that they call 911, and it's somebody that's emotionally disturbed. Our job is to help the ambulance to get them to get some help. But basically, just understanding where we could communicate with them to basically not, force them to go to these to the ambulance, because that you threaten them with ambulance, they get all riled up or they'll get upset. But if you speak to them, you explain to them what's going on, they will gently just come with you to get checked out, and it will be easier for us and for them in the long run.
Right, and Eshawn and Madeline, just go through why having a relationship with the NCOs is important as social service providers working with supportive housing populations. Have you seen a difference in the tone between NCOs and regular patrol officers you might have dealt with? Not to paint all patrol officers with a negative brush, but has there been a difference in the tone in the way that officers, the NCOs, address your population opposed to the way individuals who may not have been are now?
So absolutely, I do see a change with how NCO officers manage a crisis as opposed to, the beat cops. So, I've worked really hard with just the sector officers to try to help, change the mind frame of seeing tenants, seeing our building as a shelter. Every time they come out to the building, oh, this is a shelter, right? And I explain every time, our tenants, they're tenants. They have a lease, just like you and I. Mm-hmm. So they have rights. Oftentimes than not, they want us to just key into a unit and to go get the tenant, and I'm telling them we cannot do that. So, there's still a lot of work to be done throughout the police, the police community, but I think the NCOs is a great start because I do see when the NCOs come out, they actually have a relationship with tenants. They know how to speak with folks. and have conversations. So whatever training NCOs are getting, I think the sector cops should get that as well.
I second that. We'll go to you, Mr. Hall.
So at our location, I think it feels like the whole precinct is understanding now and on board with the same approach that these two officers have. So when I started 5 years ago, it was more you make the call, it's like the Gestapo, 40 cops are coming and more cars are pulling up while 17 cops are upstairs in front of the door. And now it's really different. The building, it used to be called, in the community, the crazy building or the tombs. So some of the officers would come in, I guess, with that same type of misinformation. So having conversations with these officers, and as well as meeting our community affairs officers, inviting them to different events so they could see the staff and the tenants in a different light and understand it is a residential building like no other, led to, a different relationship with the entire department. And something that I always say, which is a joke but not really, is I have a better relationship with the police at work than I do off duty or off of work. I get stopped, I get thrown on a wall. It's like, hey, I know Officer Smith. But it's like, and Harlem is great, but the same steps and things that I'm doing at work, I need to translate in my own community, attend the builder block meetings, meet the community affairs officers. So, thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Hall said something important. He said that there was this perception amongst at least some patrol officers who showed up to this building that the building was the crazy house. It was the tombs. Being that you're in this program now, and this is a question for all the NCOs, has your role as an NCO changed the way that you view people who are formerly homeless and people suffering from mental illness or substance abuse? Has it given you a different perception on life? How has this changed the way you view some of the most vulnerable populations? And I love that Officer Jordan spoke of he's from the community. But I'm just interested in hearing how has your perspective changed?
So before I became an NCO, every time we would go to the Brook, the Breaking Ground Brook building at 445 East 148th Street, we allow the cops label it as the EDP house, the emotionally disturbed person's house. That's because every time a call comes over for there, it was for an EDP, for emotionally disturbed person. So, we had the exact same mindset that every time we're going to go in there, it's to deal with something, bring someone to the hospital. But now as an NCO, we get very less of those calls now. And now we don't even call it the EDP house, we call it the Brook, because these people are just people. It was only one or two people that kept getting the calls. But everyone else in that building was just regular people just like us. So being an NCO kind of opened my eyes to that and made me realize, wow, there's more to this building than just an EDP house. So we need to really stop calling it the EDP house, stop getting scared when we go there. Because, these are really great people in here. And I've learned, I was able to meet a lot of great people there. Like Mr. Paul Schubert, Mr. Luis Nunez.
Paul Schubert was my constituent. He's in the Bronx now? I know that guy. Great guy.
These are all great characters, and it's great to know, man. It's great to see him in a different light now.
Just FYI, Paul is the noise complaint.
He was that when he was in my district, too. All right.
Me personally, like we're all human beings, so we all have that stigma when we see somebody that's a little off. We all have that stigma in regards to labeling people how they look or how they act or things of that nature. But I'm not gonna lie, for the most part, the way I was raised by my parents, to see everybody is, we're all the same. We're all human beings. We all, I don't religion, but God, we all people in God's eyes. So yeah, basically, I'm not gonna lie, when it was an EDP job, we had to try to wrestle them to go to the hospital. But now that we got this training, now we became NCO, and I care. This is my city. New York City is our city. I was born and raised in New York, and whatever I could do to help the community, help the people, same way I got it, growing up, coming from immigrant parents. So whatever help that we could get to give these city's people, that's what I'm, here to do.
For me personally, my view really hasn't changed. I'm a former crisis counselor, so I've always been mindful and sensitive to this group of our community. So I've been a crisis counselor prior to joining the department for about 4 years. So I interacted with a lot of people. My main group was teenagers and infants, kids that had were either sexually abused, physically abused, or parents who needed respite from their kids, that they were having problems at home and they needed time to be away. So like I said, I was a crisis counselor, so all of this is not new to me. So I'm very aware, very comfortable with dealing with this population.
Well, in my case, I've learned a lot from her. But after
My wife's a counselor too, so I can attest
yes.
to it.
Every time we have an encounter with, let's say, someone in crisis, I listened and learned. But after extensive training, NYPD have put in a lot of work and investment. I would say that now we can find the resources. Where can we send this person to? Who can we refer? Who can we contact? Sometimes people do not know there are places to go, resources. That's the main issue. And I have learned a lot from that.
And we're going to start to get to the audience for questions in a little while. We're going to begin to wrap this up. But let me go back to both providers, both Madeline and Eshawn. Can you speak to, so there may be some supportive housing providers in the room, can you speak to the importance of building a rapport with the NCO officers? What advice would you give to providers that are in the room today to strengthen their relationship with the police department?
Number one is going to make your job and your staff's job easier. All right, everybody's here now, right? All right, so when he asked if, who knows about the NCO, the builder block, there were a few hands that went up. Now people are more familiar with, what builder block and NCO is. It's not going to take much. Go to the precinct, meet the community affairs officers, meet the NCO. If you have space to offer the space. If you have bathrooms that they could be able to use, it sounds like a small thing, but it's going to help tremendously. Just with, 4 or 5 officers coming in during the 8 to 4 shift to use the restroom. With your participants entering and exiting, them just seeing police in the building. They might go upstairs, hey, you better stop, selling drugs because, there's more police in the building. Hey, you better not go try to fight Josie because, the police are all over the place. It's going to help. It's going to help. It's going to help, and it's costless. It's a no-brainer.
So just to piggyback on what Eshawn mentioned, it really doesn't cost anything, but it's going to bring a lot of many benefits to you, your staff, and the building as a whole. I can speak just from personal experience, having the officers just visit regularly, come to the buildings. Developing that relationship has really helped the Brook. We had, the drugs are always going to be there. The usage is always going to be there. However, we now have fewer people hanging out in front of the building, drug dealers hanging out in front of the building, which is improving the quality of life of our folks that live in the building, right? Like Eshawn said, people are being more discreet about it, whereas a year ago, it was in your face. You walk in, and I can imagine our tenants who are living in our building trying to, maintain their sobriety are being challenged just walking out of their unit. So now it's being more, like I said, they're being more discreet about it. And again, it doesn't cost you anything. If you can't get to the precinct, call. They have the number on the website where you can call your local community affairs officer. They have the NCO officers online. Just call them, invite them to your building, have them come visit the building, give them a tour of the building, and I guarantee you it's going to just, make things better for you and your staff and the tenants, because that's what it's about, right? Okay.
And just to add to that, the NCOs give you which numbers. Which number could they call to reach you? Raise them all up. Now, don't call them at 1 a.m. in the morning for no reason. But they all have cell phones. You can literally, and this is every New Yorker in New York City can have access to their cell number. And it's literally online. You go to your precinct's website, and you'll see all of your NCOs' names listed along with their cell phone numbers. And it's just a no-brainer in being able to build that relationship. We often hear about incidents like the unfortunate death of Kowalski Trawick in the Bronx Supportive Housing Facility. Then we do successful interactions with the NYPD. I just wanted to give us a scenario or a heartwarming story of your relationship with a particular member in a supportive housing facility, or an interaction that you remember. I don't want to get all mushy, but get a little mushy. Tell us about an instance or a member of the community at a supportive housing community you've built a relationship with, and what it's meant for you.
Actually, like I said before, I was a crisis counselor prior to coming to the job. And ironically, one of the residents that I was a counselor 2 years ago, I happened to bump into her at our location. And initially, I was very happy to see her. We hugged. I was a little bit teary-eyed also. But then shortly after, I saw her again. But this time, unfortunately, it was at the precinct because she was under arrest. So that really broke my heart. I was like, oh, my goodness, like, what happened? Because all those years, I always wondered what happened to her. She had, like, great potential. I know she was really smart. We had a great relationship. And, I gave her my phone number. We were in contact. I said, please, try to be mindful. Don't, you have your focus, you're smart, you're going to school. She actually graduated from college recently. Stay on track. Don't get caught up. You don't have to be friends with everybody in the building, and, slowly but surely, we started to build a relationship again, and she got back on track. As I said, she graduated from college, and I'm going to let Eshawn fill you in a little bit more of, like, what happened with her, because she's no longer at the residence.
But I'm going to rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
So she was one of the most challenging tenants in the building. But due to the relationship that Officer Smith had with her, she could get through to her in some of those more challenging times. And like Officer Smith stated, she did ultimately graduate from college, and she was actually our first tenant to move out of the building with her portable voucher. She secured her own apartment through her own resources, so it's definitely a success story.
So one of my stories is about an individual I mentioned before, Mr. Luis Nunez. So just to give you a little background about Mr. Luis Nunez, he's a 50-year-old male, Puerto Rican, in an electric scooter with a big Puerto Rican flag in the back and a big boombox attached to it, with music booming 24 hours, 7 days a week. So I'm getting numerous complaints about this man. This man in a wheelchair. He's playing music. He's hanging out in front of my store. He's hanging around with the wrong crowd, selling drugs. Now one day he's loitering in front of the supportive housing unit, in front of the Brook, and we get a call over for shots fired. So we go over there. Thankfully, it wasn't actual real shots. It was just a BB gun. So I guess someone from across the street, from the building across, got fed up with the loud music and started throwing shots at Mr. Luis Nunez. Thankfully, he did not get hit. It just hit one of the windows and broke the window. So as we're trying to get the story what's going on, the patrol officers are there. Obviously, they don't know everyone on the level that we do. So they're trying to talk to him. Mr. Nunez is being really reluctant to talking to them because he's old school. He's like, I'm not going to talk to police. I'm old school. I don't need your help. I can handle this myself. And then I go up to him. I say, hey, what's up, Louis? What happened? And he goes, how do you know my name, Papi? I'm like, yo, my man, I'm the NCO. I know everybody. And then from that moment on, we had this relationship because I felt like I made him into a person rather than him just being another man on hanging out on the street, how other cops make him to be. I called him by his first name, and I guess he really liked that. And since then, I don't have complaints about him having loud music in front of the building or in front of him hanging out in front of the storefronts with the drug dealers.
He's actually been really good now, so I felt like I really helped him. I really changed him. And the other day on the Puerto Rican Day Parade, I seen him on Sunday. I was like, yo, Louis, how you been, man? He was hanging out in the corner, but he was just chilling. no music, thankfully, but he had the Puerto Rican flag.
Definitely sounds like the Bronx. All righty. Before we get to the audience, I just wanted to ask the providers. So is there anything that we can do to strengthen this program? Is there any recommendation, if you had to give one recommendation for the NCO program to make it stronger for your facilities or for supportive housing providers, what would it be if you had one wish?
Like I mentioned earlier, definitely the training that the NCOs are receiving, I think to just open it up to NYPD would be very helpful for the community, for the police officers, to just be able to relate better with the people in supportive housing or the community.
Mr. Hall.
I think maybe a large media campaign to get the information out, because this is a room full of really smart and knowledgeable people, but most didn't know that the program was even in existence or how to utilize it. So I think that would be helpful.
Right. Great answer. And that's why it's important to do forums like this so that we can educate people on it. Did anybody get new information today on the program? All right, great. How many people are going to take advantage of the information you got? All righty. Making me proud. All righty. So we're going to take a few questions, and I'm going to ask you to line up there. Or she's going to walk around. Okay.
Yeah.
All righty.
It's a lot of people. I don't know if we're going to line up. But I'll get my steps in.
All righty. Got a Fitbit, too.
Hi. My name's Lisa. I'm from Buffalo, New York. We are unfortunately not in connection like you guys are with our police officers, but I'd like to work on that, and this gives me hope and faith that we can do that. However, I do have a question. I don't know if you guys, when you get calls, you've got your high priority calls and you've got your low priority calls. It seems that my buildings that I run and that I'm director of have become one of those low priority calls, no matter what call it is. So it takes an hour and a half to 2 hours sometimes for them to even come to my building. So I'm wondering, what do you do when it's a high priority versus a call from, let's say, a building such as Madeline's?
That's a great question, and the good thing is that we do not respond to calls. When you call 911, we don't get it. So we have the time to respond to low priority jobs. So either if it's a noise complaint from two neighbors having a dispute over, let's say, the garbage, we can deal with that. We can go and try to talk to them, get into a mediation. So that's why we're here, to those low priority jobs.
I have another answer. So basically, the NCO, we also I'm a sports guy, so we're considered the quarterback. So if we're not at the location, at the precinct at the time, what we do is we work with steady sectors, and Madeline or somebody will give us a text. Hey, I called 911, low priority. I just need some officers here. What happens is that we have the steady officers that work at that time. We could send them a text message as well, because we in communication. We have like a little group chat. Hey, can you swing by 455 real quick? They have a little issue, and that's how we could speed up the process as well.
In regard, you said that in Buffalo, when the calls come in, no matter if it's high or low, the response is always long. My thing is that it all depends on the type of call. Like we said, emergency, like someone has been stabbed, someone has been shot, someone raped, someone is being strangled. With that, I'm sure that the response would definitely be high. But if it's, he just pushed her, she walked out, he broke the glass, then those are low priority calls. So it all depends on what you say to the 911 operator, and also how many times you have that particular type of call, it could be turned into a cry wolf situation. It's the same thing. I'm not rushing. So you need to be mindful of what is said to the 911 operator.
Piggybacking on that, we had a location in our sector that called 911 last year 760 times. That was last year alone. So every time we had the patrol officers respond to that location, and most of the time it's for 1010s. What we call 1010s is usually, it could be a stock elevator, it could be a dispute over two tenants, low priority. So every time a patrol officer sees a job and he says, okay, 760 times they call 911, and now I have someone, a truck bicycle in the corner of Madison Avenue and 106, so they're gonna go to the pedestrian that just got struck.
Well, I have a comment, really. I just want to thank all the officers for being on this panel. You guys kind of brought me back to my childhood. Growing up in the 60s and 70s in Flatbush, Brooklyn, we had, I guess, the first model, the beat cop, the community cop, and I still remember his name now, Officer Bill. And what he did was a lot of things that you guys were doing. That he knew the community, he interacted with the teens, he was the PAL softball organizer, and we trusted him, and he looked like us. Back in the 60s and 70s, to have an African-American cop patrol your community was something like, wow. So we had such respect for him. We didn't call 911. We said, go get Officer Bill. You know what I mean? Go get Officer Bill, because he was always around, whether it was in the schoolyard, outside the school, in the community, and it was such a wonderful thing, and it seemed like over the years the NYPD moved away from that, and I'm glad to see that they're moving back to that, because this is what the community needs, officers that look like them, that can respond to them, not only in emergencies, but hey, how you doing? How you doing today? You know what I mean? So thank you.
Any questions? Any more questions? Okay, let's see. Here.
I got one right here
Hi, I'm Ray Gonzalez from Lutheran Social Service of New York. We have supported housing in Brooklyn and the Bronx. Now, how many officers are in that unit per precinct? That's one of the questions, right? And how much of your experience has rubbed off on your colleagues? You know, how much time have you, I mean, I'm pretty sure you did say that sometimes they call you, but how much of your experience and how much time you have taken to speak to your colleagues that haven't been trained, and maybe if you speak to them, their job would be easier? And then the other question, and the other suggestion is, in my supported housing and things like that, most of the issues are in night, you know, so it's like the house on the prairie in the daytime sometime, and chaos in the nighttime, you know? So is there an idea maybe to create one of these units for the nighttime, you know?
So to answer your first question, so every precinct is broken up into sectors. So each, say, for example, the 40th precinct has 4 sectors. So out of our 4 sectors, each sector is assigned 2 neighborhood coordination officers unit. In addition to the neighborhood coordination officer units, we have the steady sectors that we kept talking about. So basically, the steady sectors, who they are they're pretty much like us. It's the same officers that work the same time and the same area. So I cover Mott Haven. I'm the neighborhood coordination officer for Mott Haven, and then Mott Haven also has 6 steady sector officers. So Officer Rosa and Officer Rodriguez are always patrolling Mott Haven, but at the hours between 4 in the afternoon to 12 at night. And then Officer Nijnik and Officer Echeverria are patrolling Mott Haven in the midnight from 12 at night all the way to 7 in the morning. And then Officer Sancho and Officer Lopez will be working from 7 in the morning all the way to 4 in the afternoon. So it's the same thing, same concept. You're getting the same officers every day. So whether you're having an issue at nighttime, Officer Nijnik and Officer Echeverria will still be the same 2 officers that are coming. So they kind of know what's going on. And in addition to that, what we do as NCOs is that we are in constant contact with our steady sectors. We tell them what's going on and what's happening. So what we know, they know as well. So they have the same information. So if we're having an issue at nighttime with Mr. John Doe and Mrs. Jane Doe. So they'll know what's going on. So that's to answer that question.
Well, have you rubbed off on your colleagues?
Oh, yeah.
Mm. I know they talk to you, but maybe you can answer. Have you seen a change in them? You understand? You know?
I mean, I could talk a little bit more about that. As I said, I worked at Impact, which was basically foot patrol and write summonses and you know things like that. So, but then I was able the opportunity to be an NCO officer, and to be honest with you, the whole 40th precinct is basically brand new. I only have 6 years on, and those kids, they like new. Everybody's completely different. So I believe that the department is changing with the mindset of the officers, the mindset of what's going on. So they're getting trained from the academy basically on the newer way of NCO, because I believe they have now where they teach about NCO, and it's basically a process. So you become what we call the response auto, is basically what they run around answering every job. Then a steady sector, what me and my partner was talking about, that they move up to be a steady sector, and then they move up to be an NCO officer. So hopefully, we can't speak about every officer, but hopefully they'll come out more like us than what it was in the past.
Great. I'm going to go here and then.
Yeah, thank you for this panel. It's great. We have some issues, and I'm sure everybody on the panel can relate to this, where we have folks from the neighborhood, from the block, who are dealing drugs to our tenants or just to people in the neighborhood, like in front of our building, or sometimes they just plant their lawn chairs in front of the building and hang out and smoke marijuana. I feel like sometimes we're putting our own staff at risk by calling the police, because then the police aren't always going to be there, and we've had lots of threats against staff, and especially it's the front desk staff who are kind of the most vulnerable. They're oftentimes there by themselves at night and on the weekends. So if anybody can speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
That's a great question. Perfect example. Piggybacking on your question, you said, why don't we have a group of unit at nighttime? Whenever we have a specific issue, we can change our schedule. On a weekly basis, if we have an issue going at night, let's say 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, we make ourselves available. We change our schedule to start later, maybe that day at 6 o'clock. If you tell us, hey, Officer Pena, midnight, 12 o'clock, there's a guy here always selling. Now, going back to your question, is that when you call the police and they are scared that the staff is being threatened, what we do actually, we do direct us at location. So what we do is we go, let's say if I get a text message from you, I go and park my vehicle with my lights on in front of your location. I don't necessarily go inside your premises. Why? Because then they're going to know, oh, this person called in. You are, let's say, ratting us out. No, we actually go, we park the car in front of your location, we put our lights on, and what happens is that deters them. We kill their business or whatever they're doing, go away. Go back to your apartment, lock yourself up, and whatever you're doing, do it in your apartment.
Also, to answer your question in regards to the narcotics, so an issue like narcotics sales or narcotics use, you could attack it in different ways. Mm-hmm. So you could attack it with enforcement, or you could attack it with police presence. So like Officer Pena explained, the directed patrols. So the good thing about NCO is that you could address any issue anonymously. You don't have to say, oh, I'm from the establishment itself. You could be the person from across the street. So no, we don't really have to know who's addressing the concern. So we could address it in 1 or 2 ways. We could show more police presence. So what we'll do is we'll ourselves be more have more patrols in front of the location, and we'll also let our steady sectors know. Make sure when you're downtime, do some more patrols in that area just to show up some presence, and it will deter people from making sales over there or any illegal activity in that area. And also what we can do is enforcement, which me and my partner also do as well. The good thing about NCO is that we're the jack of all trades. We do it all. We do community stuff, and we do enforcement. We do everything. So we'll make arrests. So we've made arrests in front of the Brook in regards to narcotics sales, and we also do community stuff as well, and we talk with people. So what we can do is that we have the resources. You have resources to narcotics, to vice, any other specialized like gang units. So we can reach out to them, let them know what's going on, and they can address that as well. So that's how you go about it.
And what I would suggest also is twofold. One, we could speak on the side, who's your local council member, because that would be important. And then two, sort of opening up your space if you have community facility space to hold these build-a-block meetings. And if I think they do them reoccurring, right?
Quarterly.
So quarterly at least. But, opening up your space to have meetings so it sort of shields your staff from it as well, but also it shows the community is coming together to address issues surrounding your facility. So we'll take your information on the side. We'll be happy to follow up with you.
My name is Khadijah. I work for Breaking Ground. My building is within the confines of the Fort Tool. So we are familiar with the NCOs that come on site. But also the officers that do respond in our steady sector, they're very good. So when they come in, I think as building staff, it's also important that we communicate to the officers when they come on site. Because they come on site sometimes and they don't know what they're getting into. So they're not familiar with the population. So if it's important as, building staff that when they come in, we're like, okay, this person, you guys are here because she's an EDP. This is kind of her history. If you have a face sheet, give them a face sheet. And also go upstairs with them if it requires for them to go upstairs. Just communication is important that they do know what they're getting into. Because God forbid, certain situations could be mitigated if they just know what they're getting into. If they don't know, then the unknown is a whole different story. But they're very good just because they know how to talk to our tenants. They're familiar with the population. They used to call us a shelter, and we keep reiterating we are not a shelter. We are supportive housing. But at times when they do come and they use the bathroom, they'll ask, oh, how's my girl such and such doing? Is she okay today? You know what I mean? So it's good that they have the relationship with these tenants so that when they see them in the street, they can call us and say, hey, I've had instances where an officer will call me and say, hey, I just arrested one of your tenants on the corner of such and such. Hey, I just gave this person a ticket, or they have an upcoming court date. Can you just check in with them and let them know? So it's important that we communicate to our NCOs as well as the officers in the study sectors that do come on site on a daily. So yeah, just wanted to say that.
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering, through your work, you're in a unique position to identify patterns in problems and maybe see solutions that could be preventative beyond already what you're doing. And I'm wondering if all the NCOs have an opportunity to share what they're seeing on the ground and to share any solutions that that would prevent things escalating even more.
How many patterns you're seeing on the ground?
I could answer a little bit of it. So part of the NCOs is basically also helping the detectives. Basically, we go out and retrieve video to try to see any patterns. Like, for instance, we have an issue with car break-ins. We see all the gentleman or somebody that's doing it that match the descriptions, and we relay those messages to the detective squad so hopefully they can help them identify a certain individual, a certain group that are creating these issues. We also, like we said, we're like the quarterback of our sector. So basically with the steady sectors, we'll relate to every information. We'll send it to each platoon commander. Well, they will find out the information that's going on, and hopefully they will help everybody, administer everything that we're trying to say, that we're trying to go on, and hopefully that will help, the community, our sector, and deter crime or deter any, issues that everybody is having. I don't know if that answers your question.
Quick question, do you guys work with the co-response team?
Yes, we actually do work with the correspond team. They get in contact with us at times, and the correspondence is also under the umbrella of collaborative policing, which is our main resource of information. It's like the liaison.
Thank you for the time coming out to talk to us regarding your NCO program. Also, has there been a shift to using, especially for NCO officers or other officers, are using tasers when responding to ED calls? And has the NYPD implemented that across the board, especially for the councilman? If you can answer that question regarding using some officers using tasers as well as the body cam videos. Thank you.
So, I mean, the NYPD did, in regards to that, they did train majority of the officers in tasers. Ideally, out in patrol, the department would like to have every officer equipped with a taser, but there are times where there aren't enough tasers to go around. So, and also, every officer is also equipped with a body camera, so everyone has a body camera. So it is something that the NYPD did. They did equip everyone with body cameras, and they are trying to equip everyone with tasers. But there are situations where there aren't enough tasers for everyone.
And I'll just, I guess I could add, the idea we're trying to push the department from is using any, except in emergency situations, tasers or weapons. The idea, and there's a pilot actually happening in Staten Island now, and like I mentioned earlier, we did a 180-day review with the police department on crisis intervention, and we expect those recommendations to be coming out at post budget passage. We're working with the mayor's office now, but in Staten Island, there's a pilot that's actually happening where social workers are actually assigned to sectors, so they are responding with the department to sort of alleviate. The idea is to make sure that we have as little interaction between police, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have positive interactions, but the idea is to ensure that social workers, counselors, and others are having that interaction first before it gets to their level, right? So we hope to see this sort of scenario rolled out citywide eventually, and I would just stay tuned on the crisis intervention recommendations that are going to come, because they're all going to have an impact on each one of you in your specific facilities as well. So more to happen on that, but yes, all 37,000 officers are equipped with body cameras. We got that done a year earlier. And then in terms of crisis intervention training, I think they've trained 12,000 officers, and they're trying to get to the full 36,000 or 37,000 officers. So we're doing a lot of work to sort of push the NYPD to make sure that that number gets ramped up, so that every officer who responds, whether they're patrol, NCO, they can respond assertively and in a way that won't lead to an unfortunate death as well.
Can I ask a question? I have two questions. One, what's the difference between a community affairs officer and an NCO? This is for the panel, not the audience.
Usually community affairs attends events outside the precinct, and in general, we cover a specific area. For example, in my precinct, we have 3 community affairs officers, and they actually are the one who approve sounds permits too. They actually help with street closures as well. They close the street, make sure they get the barriers, to put the barriers cold, make sure everything happens and coordinates. Because we are more in connection with the detectives, let's say getting the video, more in connection with the community, other than getting the barriers to close the street.
Okay, got it.
I also like to explain that as community affairs, they more so deal with community events, community stuff, community meetings. NCOs, we're the boots on the ground. We're the jack of all trades, like I explained before. We do everything. We do the community events. We also do the enforcement. We're also patrolling the areas. We also do the detective work, so we're knowing the patterns as well. So that's the difference between what we do and what they do.
Great, thank you. And I would like to hear more about the relationship between the NCO and the co-response team. Like, how does that work? Sorry, I know I took this young lady's question. I'm sorry, but if you could just expound on that a little bit more, I'd be interested to hear that.
The co-response is usually similar to what the councilman said. It has to do with somewhat like social work. So it's almost like they'll get a call to go to a particular location, like a male sleeping on the park bench, he seems intoxicated, or a male being irate at a particular location. So the co-response unit, also in accordance with us, would respond to that particular location and do take their information, do like a triage intake, as to say, what's your name, what's going on, where have you been, what resources do you need, this is what we can offer you, and kind of like coach them to go with them to either to the hospital or to a facility, and we're them to back them up.
I have a question for the council member about the pilot. I'm sorry, I'm just taking the mic, but
you got the mic. You
I do.
control.
I have the mic, so listen. I would like to hear a little bit more about this pilot program in Staten Island. How long has it been running? When are you expecting to publish some outcomes? And how many officers and social workers are involved in it?
So like I said, the NYPD it's not my pilot necessarily, it's the NYPD. So all the questions you're asking me are questions we're going to have for them too on it. But I anticipate we'll have a lot more information just in about perhaps, and I think Jordan, right, we're anticipating NYPD rolling recommendations out on co-response teams on this specific pilot. And we're actually going to host a hearing eventually on it as well. So we'll have a lot more information on it. But I think the pilot's been going on for a little bit close to a year, I want to say. So we're interested in what the outcomes are there as well. So I would say in a month or two, like I said, on the recommendation side, that we anticipate we're going to roll something out with the police department. And one of the things I want to say about the task force that we were able to work with the mayor on was that it was comprised of at least 100 people. I mean, we had the hospitals at the table, we had social service workers at the table, organizations. I mean, you name it, they were at the table. And it really, during that period when we were doing the task force, it really got tense at one point, right? Because race has a lot to do with a lot of the outcomes across our city, right? And a lot of times we like to shy away from that. But we hit the reset button in that room. Like I said, it was very tense. And I think in a month or two, like I said, based on where we ended, I think we're going to have some good recommendations that come forward that I think are going to be helpful in the way we all interact with the police department, but especially our most vulnerable population. So I don't want to give you bubble gum and tell you what you want to hear today, but I think we're looking to see this specific model really roll out citywide eventually, and a lot of it takes this. So we are literally in budget negotiations today, and I think that we want to see a huge commitment by the administration on what an investment in mental health services looks like, not just for the police department, but we are really calling for social service organizations on the ground to get this money, not money going into agencies, and they should get some, but largely the organizations who the population knows should really be on the ground. Also, I'll just add on that there's no follow-up normally, right? So they mentioned a lot about people getting into ambulances and being dropped at hospitals, and no one ever comes back to find out what the outcome is. Did they get the services? Are they taking their medication? So we really are looking at changing the way the city addresses mental health, period. There has to be more cohesive follow-up on social service providers, on agencies, on the NYPD. Always want to be careful of surveillance, but the idea should be the police department should know who you are. Like if you're sleeping on the same bench every day, we should know who you are, so we're not just necessarily throwing you in an ambulance and calling it a day, but making sure that there are wraparound services that also can improve the relationship, but more importantly, the person's services.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've taken a more holistic approach to community policing and social work, and especially for our vulnerable populations. Do we have any other questions?
I'm Rebecca. I work with the Department of Health and the Office of Housing Services. A number of our programs are scatter site, where the tenants live in the community. Do you work with any of those organizations on some of the issues that those programs might come up against, such as maybe a lot of drug dealing in a building or vulnerable tenants getting their apartments taken over? Like, do you have any suggestions, or do you have experience working with those programs as well as the congregate programs?
Us personally, we've never came across any of those scattered sites. We may have, but maybe they haven't addressed it to us that they were. But I'd say the best way to address any issues that are going on, especially with those scattered sites, is to attend the Build a Block meetings, because that's how we really get to know the information what's going on and how we can help you. So Build a Block meetings can be found on buildablock.nyc. So all you have to do is pretty much enter your address, and you can find out where your local Build a Block meeting is. And also, we also have Build a Block meetings not only for patrol, but we also have them for housing, for NYCHA, and we also have them for transit, for the subways.
Yeah, so you can literally go online.
And also on Precinct on Twitters, and also on command Twitters. So pretty much every command has a Twitter now. And if you don't know what the Twitter is, it's on any back of any patrol car you see. They actually have the Twitter back there. It's like, tweet me at like 40th Precinct Twitter. Buildablock.nyc.
And you type your address in.
Build the Block NYC. You will enter your address. It's going to have a tab for your address. Once you put your address, it will tell you what precinct, what are your offices, and what sector, their phone numbers, and also the address of their next meeting and time and location.
Right. And if there's not a meeting being hosted in your particular sector, you can request it. They're going to come. If they don't, you let me know. But they will come. They're anxious to really get out into the communities. And then we do oversight. So I've held an oversight hearing on the NCO program already, and I know one of the things they're also going to be they've hired a consultant to actually measure how do we measure success with the NCO program, right? How do you measure it being successful? They've all said great things today, but they also have to be metrics attached to the program as well. So that's something we're looking at as well, and we look to see a report over the course of the next year on as well.
Good morning. My name is Alberto Cruz. I work for Canva. We have many apartments in the community with many different landlords. I know in the past there was an FTAP program that was in effect for landlords that we can advise them to sign under. Is there anything that this new policing program is encouraging landlords to use to prevent unwanted guests in buildings?
Yeah, you brought up a great thing about the trespass affidavit program. So the thing is, the best thing to do is it's not a program, it's not a bill or anything. It's pretty much just building a relationship with us. Once you build that relationship, we're gonna be more desirable to come to that location, to come say hello, to come talk to you. So as you build that relationship, more cops are gonna come. Like, oh, those cops are going there every day. Why are they going over there? Maybe we should go over there. They go hang out with them, and then that's pretty much kind of like that trespass affidavit program. So cops would come in because it says clean halls in the front, and cops would do the patrol. But the thing is, you don't really need that no more. Now you can just have a relationship with the cop, and the cop would just come on a casual kind of way, rather than coming in to look for some kind of activity or enforcement or something.
Great. We have time for one more question if anyone has one. If not, I want to thank the councilmen for being here during budget negotiations. We really appreciate that.
Don't worry, I got my pie already.
We got a sliver of that pie. Thank you so much for the officers. We really appreciate you coming here, for our service providers. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day.